Good day, you beautiful people. My name is Bizzle, this is TeaN'BizzKits, and thank you very much for joining me for another episode. This is the post-track day kind of shakedown and see what's been going on, because I had some problems with my car. So if you haven't seen the previous episode, please do check it out, because in this week's episode I'm going to be taking a look at the diff. I'm going to be taking a journey to road and race transmissions. If you're into kit cars, you know who those guys are. I'm also going to be diagnosing whether I've got a serious oil leak and issue with my engine. I'm going to be doing some compression testing and various other bits and bobs and doing a little bit of a tech talk about that. So grab a tea and a biscuit and smash that subscribe button. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to look at in this episode is oil consumption. This plagued me on the track day. I had to keep on checking and topping up the oil. It did seem to consume a bit. So after smashing away at Google, seems to me that on these 4 rages, the oil seems to escape in one of 3 different ways. Either it gets up through the breather in the rocker cover and down into the catch tank, and I've checked the catch tank and there's no oil in there, or very little anyway. So I'm pretty confident that it's not getting up to the top of the engine and it's not surging to one side or being pushed up in through the breather and down into the catch tank. The other 2 places it can go is go through the valve stem seals or its piston rings. So we're going to look at the valve stem seals first. And as you may know, this is checked with a cold start and looking for blue smoke. Now you can generally tell whether smoke's blue. Not only does it have a very distinctive smell, you know, from back in the day of old agricultural cars that just plumed the blue stuff out, but also it is very distinctive from the white. Started the car, had a quick look, trying to work out if this smoke is blue or white. I wasn't too sure. So I put this white towel down, which means it should really tell, contrasting whether it's white or blue. And it looks white to me. So I'm pretty confident that actually this is white smoke. Mainly because it looks like white smoke. So I don't think it's valve stem seals which are leaking the oil. If it is, they're not wholly responsible for it. Next thing, piston rings. So in my eyes, I've got the all clear that it's not the valve stem seals. The next thing for me then is to check the compression of each cylinder. So I need to take the spark plug cover off and I need to take the spark plugs out. Now there's a process here that I want to follow. I want to check the compression that each cylinder can make when it is cold, when it is hot, and when it is dry. And also I want to put a little bit of oil down each cylinder and then repeat the test. Does it change when the engine is cold versus when the engine is hot? And also, do I see a jump in compression pressure when the cylinders are dry versus when the pistons are wet with some oil? It seems to me that there would be a difference between hot and cold because, you know, things are going to expand and the pistons and the rings are going to have a bit of a tighter seal. So I expect to see a little bit difference there. When Googling, it seems to me that the consensus is if there's a big difference between the pistons being dry and the bores being dry versus putting some oil down the top, if you see more than 10 to 15% in compression pressure, then it means that you've probably got a leak past your rings. So anyway, spark plug covers off, spark plugs out, and let's start some testing. So I'll take to Google later on to see whether that was blue smoke or not. But for me, I think that was just condensation, considering the engine hasn't been run for a couple of weeks or so. It cleared. It didn't look blue. It looked kind of white. So I'm relatively happy with that. Doing the compression test, 125 psi, I think that's a little bit low. I mean, it's consistent across all the cylinders. And so, I mean, that's a good thing, right? So 125 again, I'll put that out. Anyone on the chat feel that's high or low? I think something around 150 would have been better, but I've got 125 psi and it's consistent. Hit me up in the comments, see what you think there. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to use a syringe and some tube which I have. I'm just going to put some oil down the cylinder head through the spark plug hole and just see if that cylinder pressure changes on the compression test, because I understand that might be something to help identify whether it's rings or not. So I'm going to squirt some oil down and see if it makes a difference. Alrighty, so the results are in and I've got a couple of graphs to show you. Let's start on the left hand side here. Now, also, let's start with a confession. I do apologise, but I think I got my cylinder numbering wrong. So I didn't count cylinder 1 at the end of where the cams are. No! I actually put it at the back where the water pump outlet is. So the cylinder numbering convention might be backwards, but nevertheless, I'm not actually going to start any work on this engine. Not yet, anyway. So, what we've got here is the cold, dry cylinder pressure, the hot, dry cylinder pressure, and then the cold, wet cylinder pressure, and the hot, wet cylinder pressure. And so what we can see here is that the lowest, no surprise really, is a cold engine with no extra oil down the cylinder bores. And we're hitting around about 130, peaks at 140 on cylinder 3. You know, they're within around about 10% of each other, which isn't too bad. That certainly doesn't suggest that there's an absolute failure on one of the particular cylinders, which is good. When I then put some oil down the cylinders, it does jump up a fair bit. And we are talking 15% up to 20%. And so that is a little bit alarming. So I would say that the rings, it seems like on this simple test, that there is some leakage of oil down past the cylinders. Or, you know, there is a difference when we put some oil into the cylinders and therefore there is some blow by, some leaking. Because basically the thick viscous oil stems that gap temporarily and allows an additional cylinder pressure to be built up. And that's evident within this testing. When we warm the engine up, we can see that the cylinder initially, so hot, dry, climbs up to the kind of pressures that I would like to see actually on this engine a bit more, around about 150 psi. And it's relatively consistent, again within 10% across all 4 cylinders, which suggests to me that's good news, that we don't have one cylinder that's causing particular problems. When we then put some heat cycle into the engine and some warmth into the engine, and then we put some oil back down the cylinders through the spark plug holes, we can see it jumps up again, and the percentage that it jumps up, you know, ranges again from around about 15 all the way up to just under 20%, but not as dramatic as when it was cold. So, what does that tell me? Well, from the uneducated point of view and looking at the right-hand chart now, what this suggests to me that cylinder 1, cylinder 3 in particular, and cylinder 4, you know, they're on the borderline healthy. Cylinder 3 looks pretty good to me. Cylinder 2 seems to have a lot of leak. The difference between putting a compression test on a dry cylinder versus a wet cylinder. That jumps up 19-20%, which, you know, again, smashing Google suggests that's too much. So I may have some oil leaking by the rings on cylinder 2. The other thing which I found particularly interesting about this is that on the right hand chart there, you can see that the difference in percent change is not as dramatic as when the engine is cold versus when the engine is hot. And I just think that's because, again, you get the engine hot, it's a cold day, so, you know, we're sitting around 10 degrees, we put a good extra 70-80 degrees on top of that to get the engine nice and hot. And therefore what's happening is everything's expanding and getting a little bit tighter, and any clearances which are occurring within the cylinder bores are closing up. And that's why you're getting a bit more consistency across the cylinders. So to conclude, my engine is not majorly an issue. There's not any massive fault that prevents me from driving it that's a big problem. But there is very likely to be an issue on cylinder 2, which is more than likely to be the piston rings and more than likely going to be some blow by on them piston rings, which is where I'm getting my oil leak. And that will manifest in black smoke. We saw some black smoke, didn't we, on the track day? So I'm thinking that that sounds about true to me. What's my conclusion? What am I going to do about this? Beginning of the season, isn't it? Send it! So I think I've drawn an end to that. I want to change the oil anyway. So I'm actually going to drop the oil now and have a quick look through the engine oil. Just make sure there's no obvious signs of excessive wear. This is always good to do anyway. You know, go foraging through your oil just to see if you can see any grit, any sparkles, any issues or concerns. You know, what you don't want to see is big chunks of metal. What you don't want to see is sand grain sized of metal. Other than that, you know, you can sometimes see a little bit of glistening within the oil, but you know, there's lots of minerals and all sorts of stuff within the oil, so sometimes it looks a bit glistening, but actually, you know, it's not. For me, if I can't pick it up and get it on my finger, and if I can't feel it in between the grains within my fingertip, then it's not there. That's just far too fine in my eyes. But do you know what? Hit me up in the comments. Tell me whether I'm doing this right or wrong. Is there a way of getting rid of all the oil off the top so when all the metal is sunk to the bottom, I can actually just see it a bit easier? I suppose I could pass it through a gauze, but the gauze is going to have to be very thin, which means the viscous oil is not going to go through it. So I'm genuinely interested. Stick a comment and tell me how I should be checking my oil, because I do it 3 or 4 times a year. So I might as well kind of do it right. Anyway, having a sift through this oil, I spot nothing. It's good. I have a good look around, constantly moving my finger around at the bottom, whisking it up, seeing if I can churn up any bits of metal. I can't find anything here. So that makes me really, really happy. So that means there's no excessive wear in my engine as far as I can tell. So it's not something that's catastrophically that's gone bad. It means my big ends aren't wearing or anything like that. So I'm really happy with this. Another tick that actually my engine is not that unhealthy.
Alright, you beautiful people, you have just caught me as I embark on something pretty stupid for multiple reasons. I'm basically setting myself up to fail.
I have a really bad feeling about this.
Why is that, Bizzle? Well, let me tell you. It's cold, it's late at night, and I'm just about to do something that I've never done before.
I thought it was safe.
And I'm going to set myself a time challenge to do it in.
Done, Drill Sergeant!
Because a few weeks ago, someone asked about how to get the diff out of a kit car and how long would it take to do it. I need to take the diff out of my car because tomorrow I'm taking it to Road and Race and they're going to refurb it for me. So, I need to take it out tonight. Time challenge. There's a clock up there. Borrowed from my son's bedroom, and also I have 2 hours left on this SD card. So, unlike Matt Armstrong and others who genuinely do know what they're doing, I don't.
What size you gave me? 10. You gave me a 10 as well, ain't?
Yeah, they are 10.
Oh, are they? I thought Chinese things are like odd.
Well, this is Japanese, so...
Never taken the back end of this car off, not taken a diff out of a kit car for a long time. I'm going to see how long it's going to take me to do this. From bare bones, cars off the trailer, tools have not been put away since the track day. It's chaos. Let's see how long it's going to take. All the way from literally undoing the wheel nuts and cracking on with the car. Don't know how long it's going to be. Keep an eye on that clock and let's hope it's less than 2 hours, otherwise I'm going to run out of time. Let's go!
So the first thing to do here is to undo the wheel nuts before jacking it up, otherwise you can't get the wheels off. I do have an ugger dugger now though, which is quite nice. So loosen off the nuts, take the wheels off, on to the next job. Now there are lots of bolts that are hidden behind the seat, at least 3 per side plus the diff. So both seats need to come out. And this is the first time I've taken the driver's seat out. Still comes out the same way, 4 bolts on the bottom, seats come out. Big old whopping great bolts with spacers that go through onto the floor plan. They're out. Done. Then there's these screws which I didn't have access to before, and then there's some on the outside edge as well, so I need to undo them, and then working around to the back. On the back we've got these big exhaust clamps which go around the roll cage. Undo these. And then there's 6 bolts that run across the back. Undo these. Just unplugging a few bits and bobs, checking that there's no other screws around that I need to undo. Cracking on with the time, not doing too bad. It's just gently peeling off the rear clamshell here. Again, I've never done this before, so just checking, making sure there's no other nuts and bolts. Something doesn't quite feel right. Thought I've got everything undone. Plug. There we go. Right, clamshell off. Happy days. Yeah. Okay, taking the opportunity, I don't know if that's within the hour, but rear clamshell is off, so I can't get to the diff without taking the fuel tank out. So what I need to do next is drain the fuel tank, take the fuel tank out, and then I should be able to get onto the diff. So next up, fuel tank. Oof. So while I'm doing one of the easiest jobs that I've probably got to do here, which is draining the fuel, may I remind you to subscribe, like and share. If you're watching this, and try and get yourself along to Kitfest on the weekend of the 6th of April, where I'll be there, and Northwest Kit Car Owners Group and 7 Spot and many other people will be, and we're going to have a lovely time. I might take this down the strip, God knows what I'll get. Be nice if I get into the 13s. The few times that I have been to Santa Pod and watched some rungs, I've always felt that 13-second cars are, you know, they're starting to push on a bit, over 100 mile an hour. So if I get over 100 mile an hour and I get 13 seconds, I'll be happy with that. So get yourself along to Kitfest. Oh my God, I've had more fuel in there than I thought. Just keep on going, I guess. Alrighty, fuel tank is out. Ah, look. Spacer. Spacer. The other two are probably on the floor. So, diff. Cross bolt here. Long bolt down the bottom there. Looks like bolts here as well. New for me, that, on the Striker. Never had this on the previous one. That was all open. And then bolts at the front. And then a drive shaft as well. Is that how it's going to come out? I have to unbolt this cage. This whole cage might have to come out. Oh man, more hassle. So with spanners in hand, it's time to undo that rear frame and take this off so I can get access to the diff. 2 diff bolts come undone. And then it's working at the front, undoing the 4 diff bolts for the drive shaft. And just slowly working around the diff, undoing the bolts as I need to. 2 front nose ones come undone. Time's still going good. Then I've undone some of the wishbones here, upper wishbone, shocks are out. So it's time to just see if I can pull that out. Slowly coming. It's just a pushing shaft. I don't have what I think are called low bro shafts. So drive shafts out, still working, carrying on, undoing lots of bolts as I go. There goes the other drive shaft. Get that out the way wherever I can. Now I'm working on the 2 last bolts for the diff, these big long ones. Top one come undone quite nicely. Left that just as it was so that it still had some weight off of the bottom bolt. If I took that out, I would definitely not be able to get that bottom bolt out. But it's loose, and now I'm onto the last bolt, probably the hardest one to access, to be honest. This one right at the back, well, front. And it's a nightmare because as I'm undoing it, the thread has nothing to bite onto, so I've got to try and push the bolt from the other side to slide it out. Then get caught out, but in the end, it's out. Yeah, stop the clock. Yeah. What was that, 2 hours? 2 hours non-stop graft. That's how you take a diff out of a raw Striker. Woo! So this is the aftermath once the diff is out. This chassis actually varies quite a bit compared to my old raw Striker. I've got double 25mm box here.
I think this is different here. Obviously this additional frame is something I don't have. And so I wonder how much these vary, not just raw striker, but kit car to kit car. More than well happy to see comments and photographs of what your kit car looks like, because I'm genuinely interested. But it's very grubby, very dirty, but I'm over the moon that I've managed to get this out. So now this can go off to road and race. I'll be driving down there tomorrow and you'll be joining me. Woof, done.
Road and Race Transmissions is an Aladdin's cave of glorious bits and bobs. Ollie and Phil, very accommodating, really nice fellas. They took their time to talk me through the company, the history, what they've been up to. To be honest, they're fascinating. No wonder why they're top of their game. So with the diff back and in the garage, I wanted to take the opportunity while it was still out to give the back of the car a good deep clean. I'm then going to treat it to a 3-stage Pour 15 gloss black finish. So generally pretty happy with the way the clean's going at the moment. This is a damn sight better than what it was. Copper pipes actually look copper coloured now. Lots of brake cleaner and washing up liquid, degreaser, but we're getting there. So I've just got some other clutch and brake cleaner on its way. So I just need to finish off a few bits. And then it's a case of using the proper pour cleaner and then etching and then getting ready to paint. You can see, look, it's stripping off in quite a few places here. All this paint here, all this paint over here. Some of it actually looks in pretty good nick. I mean, across this bar here, down here, bits of rust and stuff up here. So as well as the main chassis, I'm going to start on the rear wishbones and uprights as well. They all need a strip back, clean and paint. The wishbones are particularly bad. I can literally just peel this powder coating off. And as you can see here, it really doesn't take much. And behind it, the rust is pretty prolific. The same as with the uprights and the upper rear wishbones as well. And the chassis is not too great either. When I start attacking it with the wire brush, you can see that even more paint comes off. Lots of rust on the uprights and the upper wishbones and the lower wishbones and the drive shafts. All needs to be cleaned back, smoothed out, so I can start the prep. And with some serious work with the wire brushes, this is actually already looking a lot better. You can see how much has come off of all the wishbones and the chassis, which is also looking kind of a bit better. Yellow primer underneath, that's a bit weird. But anyway, onwards and upwards. So this is where I'm at now. All the parts are cleaned using the Pour 15 degreaser product, rinsed down, dried, and should be ready now for etch primer. These are looking nice and clean. Obviously there's still rust and minor bit of pitting on these, but I'm hoping that the Pour 15 is going to save this. Also got a heater in here. This is all dry, but just trying to get some ambient temperature up, just so I can speed up this process. The drive shafts are down there. They're going to get a lick of paint as well, and etch primer if there's some left over. So this is after coat 1. You can kind of already see that it's starting to react. It's turning the rust kind of a milky colour, and the metal is also starting to turn a milky colour. So it's definitely starting to react a little bit. So I'm just going to quickly crack on with the second coat. Need to try and keep this wet as much as I can. I need to get another coat on quickly. Look at these lovely little beauties fresh off the printer. Do you know what these are for? Let's give them a clean up and you'll see. So these go in the end of here so that when I paint it, I don't get paint on the bush and I don't get paint on the inside. So it's just a little cover that I've 3D printed, ready to press in. Going just like this. So this is the first coat of Pour 15 on. It's been sitting here for a good while now. It's now at the stage where it's tacky, so I can drag my finger, but I don't get any paint transferred onto my finger. This is smoothing out quite nicely. It might come across on the camera quite rough, but do bear in mind that this was not flat back beforehand. So there was rust lumps and there was also previous paint on here as well. But actually this has smoothed out very impressively. I remember this from before when I used it on a previous car. It does a very good job at smoothing it out. Bearing in mind it's been painted on rust. This actually looks really nice. Yeah. I don't know if it's coming across on the camera as good or bad. Maybe you just got to take my word for it. Let me get the shine on that. There you go, look. So you can see it's definitely got, you know, it's not powder coat completely smooth, but then again, it had bobbly, rusty bits beforehand. Going to get this second coat on now. Heater's still going to try and keep the temps up. Then it'd be bedtime.
So I've put the first coat on the chassis and on the drive shafts, just waiting for that to go off before I do the second coat. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is just thread all the new 8mm copper fuel line through. Hopefully that's going to go through pretty easily, and then I just need to obviously bend it upwards a little bit so that I can attach the rubber hose which is in the engine bay, and also bend it down so that I can connect to the outlet of the fuel filter, fuel pump, can't remember which one is the last one in. So I've just straightened it out by hand. I don't have any tools to do this, so fingers crossed. It's, you know, it's copper, so it shouldn't kink unless it has a real tight radius. Seems to be relatively easy to work with, another thing that I've never done before. So I've just straightened it out. I'm just feeding it down the transmission tunnel at the moment, until I can see it poke out the end, and I'm going to bend the top up, see how much I need, cut it off, and then, yeah, easy peasy, isn't it? So I've bent that up now. Didn't really get to see much. This is the new one here. Comes up just next to this one. Again, it's a little bit dark down there, but you can see the new copper pipe. So relatively happy where this is at the moment. Obviously it's going to be P-clipped all the way along here, and I might make some sort of bracket up here to tie these two together. So fingers crossed. It's, you know, it's copper, so it shouldn't kink unless it has a real tight radius.
I just kinked that fuel line by hand. After doing like 3 bends successfully, not really caring too much about what the bend radius was, with no tool, I thought I'd be able to out with my hands. Turns out it's not very easy. I think it was particularly cold last night when I did it. That's a waste of copper line. So I've gone and bought some more, and I've only gone and printed a little tool, haven't I? Because I don't have a copper pipe bend tool. So why not 3D print one? Because I'm not going to pay like 12 or 15 quid for one that's going to put like 1, 2, 3 bends in. Probably should have done that to start off with, because then I wouldn't have had to buy more copper line, which costs more. Let's give it a go on the vise, and then let's straighten out the copper pipe, cut its shape, bend it 3 times, and have another go. Alrighty, so I've got this copper pipe, just bent a little bit out. So the idea is this goes on, nut and bolt through, just loosely. And then I think what's going to happen is this one is going to stay still and this one is going to rotate round. Just going to confirm that. Put a little line on here, because when I obviously do it for real, I'm going to want to know that. I'm just going to get that lined up with that hole, and then see if I can bend it to about 90 degrees. Now, am I going to be able to get this off? Oh, that bit comes off all right. Hey, look at that. Nice and smooth. There's a slight little dent here, but actually, yeah, that's superb, that. Right, let's see if I can do that on the real thing. Sorted. So that's all looking good, pretty happy with that. So here's for my next trick of 3D printing this.
double P clips.
So I'm going to start by drilling out the old pop rivets. As you can tell, one of the P's was bigger than the other P, but now I've got two 8mm lines that are the same size. It's just a normal double P, a B if you like, and these are looking trick, better than OEM. So as you can see, the first parts are starting to go back in now with the fuel filter and then the fuel pump, and that's now connected up to the new copper hose which runs all the way through the car. I think next up is the diff. Yeah, let's see if we can squeeze the diff back in. Must say this car is absolutely filthy, and I bought it like this as well, and I did give it a good clean out, but not too much because I was just keen to drive it. And now obviously getting the seat out is really exposed how dirty it is in many other areas. Never had the driver's seat out before, so I've never noticed that it's got like these little snot welded stand-ups here. Well, I can't really overly trust these, if I'm honest. They're a bit crap. Might give these a bit of a clean up, and if they're okay, paint them, but you know, that's basically what you're sitting on there. Before I kind of did this bolt up, I wanted to just clean all this up because, you know, I don't take the driver's seat out often. This is quite interesting, this bit here. So this is it on the other side. This modification here, this is the standard tube here that would have just gone down onto here, as it creates a triangulation. So someone previously has decided to cut that and put that down there. That obviously creates a weakness here, doesn't it? You know, an area where the chassis could flex a little bit, as well as maybe side protection. But let's be honest, you can't be relying on 25mm box side protection. If you're driving one of these and you're worried about getting T-boned, it's not the car for you. But this would probably create a little bit of reduced torsional stiffness within the chassis, especially obviously it's on the same side as well. They haven't put any additional triangulation into here, which might have helped if they breached it with triangulation in this area, although spreading that bracing across the width of the car is a lot stronger in terms of mechanical rigidity. But yeah, even this, you post mod, obviously, you know, they've just angle grinded or whatever away from that and put this new one in. But this style of modification, you know, this welding, which is not pretty but seems okay, some of it ground out afterwards, is exactly the stuff that I see round here, you know, at the back. This sort of stuff is all like this, and this brace is made in exactly the same way. So someone at some point has gone to town on this chassis, making some various modifications, because this whole area here is not factory. This double bracing and the gussets, which you can see down in the corner there, they're not standard. All of that's been added. This has been added, and at the same time, that's been hacked as well. Just makes me wonder why they didn't just do it properly, put a roll cage in, you know, take the side panels off and put them back on. It seems like a serious modification to do and not finish completely. But anyway, I did spot that when I bought the car. I did know that it was like that. And my intention is really probably to get a full roll cage put in at some point, in which case, you know, these kind of things matter less. But even while doing that, you know, I could put a cross brace on here to try and give it some structural integrity. Yeah. I think it's just where the seat hits, the same as their tactic for this side is just to smash the crap out of it. Look at that. That is a big dent that they've put in that side panel. So I guess try and squeeze the new seats in. That's what I've got. This is what I'm dealing with. It's a project, right? So now all of this is a lot cleaner, I can get this diff bolt back in at the front. In terms of this paint here and on this floor, I haven't decided what I'm going to do about this yet. come back to that. Might not be covered in this episode. In fact, it's not going to be covered in this episode. I need to do a bit of research, see what people are doing, and then go from there. This bolt's in, other side's already hand tight, so just crank these up and I can carry on moving around to the back of the car. So we wonder how hard this poor 15 is. So these two washers were left on one of the bolts which was used to hang the lower wishbone, and so paint has got on these, which, you know, I'm not overly fussed about. My God, trying to separate these is a pain in the It's not just a case of gently sliding a screwdriver down. I'm gonna have to hammer it apart.
That's what she said.
That's my joke, damn it.
Oh, I've lost it now. Down the back of the workshop. So you don't want to know how much swearing, effing and jeffing was required to get all this back together. I had to undo some bolts or retake some bolts out to allow the wishbone to twist. This bolt here was a pain to get in, needed just slight movement, so I had to then undo this one and then re-undo this one. It's in now. Leaving it finger tight at the moment. I'll tighten it all up at the end, but that's all in. I've made a quick start on the other one. Rust free, nice and clean. That's all we're really looking for here. I know that the paint finish is really glossy, which looks ropey, and it shows up all of the lumps and bumps underneath, but this stuff is hard as you like. And you can see here I've taken all of the insulation off of the adjusters as well. I didn't paint over them. So all that's looking good. Yeah, on to the next side. So I'm going to crack on with this other side, put it all back together. I just want to quickly cover something about the diff oil. So when I was at Road and Race, they were talking about what oil to put in it, and they gave me this red line they really swear by, and this is 75W140NS, which is slightly different to the normal oil, which I think they recommend, you know, that Ford and generally everyone puts in. Apparently, that's a better oil to put in for two reasons. One, because I've got a slightly different crown and pinion with the higher ratio, but also because it's got quite a bit of power going through it. Apparently, that's just going to help the diff last a bit longer and just deal with what's going on. So, going to put that in once everything else is kind of back together and before I put the fuel tank in. But I'm going to end this episode here. So thank you very much for tuning in to TeaN'BizzKits. Remember to subscribe, like and share and all that jazz. And my name's been Bizzle. Catch you again soon.